You know it's serious when not even the king of curses thought that you were capable of doing something like this. Chapter 261 is the kind of chapter that triggered a civil war within the fandom. Is Yuta desecrating Gojo's body? Or is he elaborating on what it means to be a monster like Gojo Satoru? If you go on Twitter, you'll see some absolutely wild and unhinged takes regarding this development. But in hindsight, and with all things considered, this was a brilliant character moment for both Yuta and Gojo. Is Yuta a monster for using Gojo's body? He did something that even stunned Sukuna, the disgraced one. Well, in this video, we're going to be doing a full breakdown of what this moment means for Yuta and Gojo's character arcs, and how it fits into the bigger picture of the series. My name is TK, and this is Lobotomy Kaisen. First off, let's start with Yuta's character itself. From the very beginning, he has been portrayed as a complex character who looks and acts all sweet, but basically becomes a menace when it comes to actual Jujutsu combat. He is only a year older than Yuji, but he was already the #2 guy at the Jujutsu Society. In both name and deed, he has been Gojo Satoru's protege. But what we saw in chapter 261 was next level, and it once again puts it into perspective how Jujutsu Kaisen is not like a usual battle shonen. When you think about it, it's actually not supposed to be that big of a deal because Yuji himself ate the other death paintings, who are basically his brothers, but of course, it's different when it's Gojo. Unlike Yuji and those paintings, Gojo and Yuji are actually good people with a proper relationship. That's why it makes sense for some fans to be upset because their goat's corpse is now being used as a literal tool. However, the chapter brings up a very interesting point. Since when the hell was Gojo not a tool? When Maki tells Yuta that he is too important to them to be planning something so hardcore, Yuta flips out. He clenches his teeth and asks about Gojo Sensei. Wasn't he important to them too? This is a very interesting question because yes, Gojo was his own person, and we're not going to suddenly pretend that everyone always hated him because of course they didn't. Gojo meant a lot to a lot of people. He was their sensei. But maybe it was some subconscious bias because everyone also always expected Gojo to be the strongest, to be a monster. The reason why the Jujutsu Society was somewhat stable before Yuji ate the finger, even with all that corruption and stupidity from the higher-ups, is because of Gojo's existence itself was a deterrent that was keeping everything in check. Everybody knew that it was impossible to beat Gojo. He was the strongest, and that's all there was to it. But as Geto once said, Gojo could easily kill all of the non-sorcerers in the country. It would have taken him hardly any time at all to take over Japan. So was Gojo really the monster? Yes, but it's more like he was playing the role of a monster, and as we already established, Gojo being the monster made sense to everyone so much that it became their subconscious nature. Do you guys remember when Yuji and Megumi went to get Hakari on the team? Kirara made a good point about why anyone would need them because Gojo is always there to clean up any mess, right? And when Megumi told Kirara that Gojo Sensei got sealed, Kirara doesn't believe him at all. Her mind casually rejects the very thought that Gojo Satoru of all people can be sealed. Though it's not like Gojo ever minded his role or his position. His personality suited his role, and he knew that he's him. It is also very interesting how he didn't have any objections regarding Yuta taking his body, but it makes sense considering Gojo's character. He literally said who cares what happens to his body after he dies, and naturally he also added that he is planning on winning, so it doesn't matter anyway what the plan is after that. If anything, the one thing that did bug him is that Shoko was all cool and chill with this decision. Anyone would have been ticked off though in that situation because she is like his best friend after Geto. Just goes to show how Geigi makes sure to show us that Gojo is just a person, even though everyone is making all these fancy statements about him. Alright, how about a few sentences on that panel from chapter 261 where Gojo told Yuta, Maki, Panda, and Toge to scram because he's going to kill all the higher-ups by himself. Gojo doesn't want to expose the students to such a gory scene, so he tells them to leave, but nah, they were staying. As Yuta declares Gojo should stop trying to be a monster all on his own. Now, the context until this point is self-explanatory. The story is showing us the multiple layers of Gojo's character. How he is perceived, and how he is supposed to be. But the rest of the panels brings up something rather surreal. When Yuta tells Gojo to stop trying to be a monster all on his own, Gojo tells himself that he can't do that. He recalls that encounter with Geto in front of the KFC and tells himself that on that day, he was left behind. Now he has to catch up. Guys, this is all before the final fight with Sukuna. Gojo is fully intent on becoming a monster, and in his mind, he has to catch up to Geto, who actually did become a monster that day. Naturally, the definition and one's reasoning for becoming a monster are different, and Gojo isn't as hardcore as Geto. But the way this panel was portrayed shows us that Gojo has always been well aware of the fact that he isn't as hardcore as Geto, a monster. Maybe there could have been a different ending for everyone if he stuck with Geto. Who knows? What's wrong and what's right? All he knows is that he was the one who was left behind. Geto's reasoning was absolutely 100% wrong, but unlike him, Geto was focusing on finding a solution beyond the status quo. What if back then he had reached out to Geto in order for them to become the monsters together, but rather than just straight up exterminating non-sorcerers, they could have also come up with a more reasonable solution. It's very fitting how Gojo is having this monologue right before he massacres all of the higher-ups. As he entered through that door to kill them all, he was catching up to Geto. Okay, so back to the big question about Yuta. Is he a monster for using Gojo's body? Yes. Yes, he is. And for a little bit of added context, let's elaborate and break down the reasoning. Think about it this way. Yuta's resolve to use Gojo's body is just as much a statement as it is a means to an end. When Kusakabe asks if it's ethical, Yuta is right to be upset because what the hell does that even mean? They're up against the single strongest sorcerer in history. Why shouldn't they be willing to abandon their humanity for the sake of winning? Personally, the arguments regarding it being ethical or not also make sense. Imagine if Batman suddenly decided to use one of the Joker's tactics in order to save Gotham. What Yuta is doing here really isn't any different, and that is why Sukuna was so amused by what he did. In the bigger picture, Yuta taking over Gojo's body also symbolizes how the new generation has to step up and sometimes go beyond the rules to protect what they love. So yes, Yuta is a monster for using Gojo's body, but in a twisted, necessary evil kind of way. It's yet another blatant slap to the face that things get about as gray as they can get when it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen. They struggle, make tough choices, and sometimes even have to become the very thing that they're fighting. There is a reason why it's often mentioned that no Jujutsu sorcerer dies without regret. It's simply the kind of role where you have to get your hands dirty. Even someone as pure as Yuji was driven to a point where he didn't care what he had to eat as long as it meant defeating Sukuna. What is even the difference between a hero and a monster? When it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen, there is none. Gojo being the monster also meant that everyone could leave it to him to clean the mess, but now that this role has been passed down to the next generation, we'll have not just Yuta, but also Yuji, Megumi, and the rest to carry the cross. It really makes you wonder what's going to happen next. Even if the cast kills Sukuna for good, what would have become of Yuji and Megumi? Not to mention the threat of the merge is also heating up in the background. Finally, the most important point regarding the discussion is the psychological toll. These characters have been to hell and back, but they are not Sukuna. The moral, psychological, and personal dilemmas aren't going to ease up. We haven't even seen Yuji's reactions to Yuta using Gojo's body yet, and you know that there must be a reason why we haven't seen Yuji's reaction yet, because Yuji also wasn't around when the gang was coming up with this plan. Both Yuji and Yuta are the kind of characters who will actually understand Gojo on a personal level. Chapter 262 was cut short, but we're absolutely in for a complex reaction from Yuji when we get down to it. Do comment down your thoughts on what could have been Yuji's reaction to this development. And in case the chapter is already up by the time you've seen this video, let's talk about what you think of his reaction. All in all, becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer and a monster go hand in hand. Geto is an extreme example, but let's not forget that Maki is more of a monster because of how she exterminated her clan with a cold expression on her face. Yuji ate those death paintings and has always been fully intent on sacrificing himself to defeat Sukuna. As for Yuta, he declared himself Gojo's replacement for that monster. Though I am not going to lie, it was wild how easily he went down in the few panels we did get of chapter 262. I know there's going to be more to it, but these past couple of weeks of Lobotomy Kaisen memes have been insane. But maybe that's why we love this series. It's unpredictable, it's dark, and it's continuously ignoring the common battle shonen tropes. Alright, so what do you guys think? Especially about Yuta's fate. He's only going to last 5 minutes and nobody knows what's going to happen to him after that. Will he die? Will Gojo momentarily take over the body? Will Yuta be absorbed by the merge? Mei gave us a few possibilities on what could happen to Yuta. If Kenjaku's curse technique functions constantly or at irregular intervals, Yuta will be able to sustain his soul and die. Even if the curse technique functions irregularly, Yuta will eventually die anyways. Though if the curse technique activates only once, Yuta may be able to use the limitless even after those 5 minutes. And the final possibility is that he'll lose his own curse technique and will have to live in Gojo's body forever. But these are all just Mei's guesses. No one knows for sure. Maybe Yuta will die before those 5 minutes and we'll never know what's going to happen to him after the time limit passes. Knowing Geigi, this is somehow surprisingly likely. Come on guys, let's continue this discussion down in the comment section down below. Do you think Yuta's a monster? What's going to happen to him after the 5-minute time limit? And what do you think is going on right now within Jujutsu Kaisen and what's going to come next? It's always appreciated. My name is TK. Thanks for watching.